Alrighty fellas, we back for another Fire Emblem Engage video, and today we're going to go ahead and do a tier list ranking the 12 Emblem Rings in the game. And I have completed my very first run, which was a Maddening Classic run. Pretty fun. The game is a little difficult, but nothing too tough for your boy to handle. So all of these rankings are going to be solely based on my Maddening experience and which rings I think definitely stood out the most, whereas the other rings that may not have, which we're going to be ranking a little bit lower. So just keep all of that stuff in mind. If you haven't played the game on Maddening, I feel like you can't really enter this sort of discussion because we are talking about which rings are going to be the most successful in the hardest difficulty of the game. So, without further ado, let's go ahead and get started here, and we're going to go ahead and place our first ring, Marth, all the way up in S tier. Marth may be the first ring that you get, but he's also one of the most solid, and he holds up at all points in the game where he's available. So, Marth's ring has some pretty good skills for inheritance, such as break defenses, which lets you do a second attack after causing a break on the enemy at 50% damage. Just a really easy way to pile on some damage there. He also has a Void up 30, which is going to be your primary way to defend against attacks on Maddening, because the enemies just come in with such high attack. You're not going to be able to cut it with just tanking them by defense. So being able to dodge is one of the strongest things you can do, and a Void up 30 is a very strong skill. Not only that, he's really good for combat. He might be the most combat-capable ring out of the entire batch, actually, because a lot of his weapons are very strong. He has the Rapier, which is effective against armor and cavalry. Probably the two most common enemies you're going to fight besides the flyers. And he also has the Falchion, which is strong against dragon types. Very good against certain bosses later in the game. And he also has Mercurius, which is a good weapon for gaining some bonus experience. Experience is hard to come by in Maddening modes, so any little extra bit of experience you can get is very good. So he's amazing for combat. He's got great skill inheritance. He's got great weapons. Marth is just a fantastic ring. Okay, let's go ahead and take a look at Celica up next. And I have Celica in the B tier. Now, this may be a little bit of a surprise to some people because she does have Warp Ragnarok as her main attack, which is definitely a good attack. And it's got a lot of applications to it because you're able to just warp a unit to a lot of spaces. You can cover a lot of ground with it and then do a strong attack that the enemies have no way to counterattack. So that is very good. She does have access to some pretty good weapons as well, such as Ragnarok and Seraphim. So I gave Celica's ring to my Hortensia, and that's because Hortensia's main class does not have access to S-rank tomes. It only goes up to B rank. So, Celica's tomes are some of the stronger ones in the game, Seraphim especially, being effective against the Corrupted. So, a pretty strong tome to just give to Hortensia. Warp Ragnarok, also pretty good, so she can jump around the map and go ahead and do a free attack on the enemies. She also gives some pretty solid stat bonuses, like magic and speed. So, Celica's definitely a solid ring. Just because you see her in B tier, that doesn't mean I think she sucks. I think she's actually quite good. However, she's going to feel a lot stronger during the time that you get her ring, as opposed to later on in the game where Warp Ragnarok's damage starts to not be as impressive, and it's really only good for the mobility that it provides. So just keep that in mind. She may seem unbelievably good at the start, but she does start to taper off a little bit in terms of how amazing she is. Okay, next up we have Sigurd. We're going to go ahead and toss Sigurd in the A tier. Sigurd is one of the units on here, one of the emblem rings on here that I feel like I could be talked into bumping him up a tier. So Sigurd's amazing. This might be my favorite ring if it's not the strongest ring in here. So Sigurd, of course, is a man's man. He gives you access to Cancer, which is unbelievable, very strong in this game, and very strong in basically every Fire Emblem game. So you're going to want to give Sigurd's ring to one of your healers or one of your mages so they can either heal or attack the enemies and then run away, hide behind some of your avoid tanks or defense tanks and play the game in that manner. He also can engage with your ally to give them a ton of mobility. I'm talking like maybe +7 movement on the map. like doubles your movement essentially. So I gave Sigurd's Ring to Ivy. Now that might not seem like the most optimal way to use his ring, because you're missing out on his weapons such as Rider's Bane, Brave Lance, Tearfing, and all those things. I don't feel like his weapons are really that good. I feel like he may have one of the weaker set of weapons out of this batch. And really the main strengths you're getting out of him are the build that his ring grants. It gives you +4 to build, which is very strong. And Ivy being a tome unit, her build is okay, but it's not the greatest. However, a lot of the tomes you're going to want to give Ivy are very heavy. So being able to just minimize the detriments from that is very good. And then the mobility is super useful. Ivy being able to fly and then cover like 50 spaces, then having cancer, and then being able to heal or being able to attack and then cancer away. It's just, I found it to be a very good thing to give it to Ivy, even though you miss out on the weapons and momentum, another good skill that he has. So just a lot of awesome things about Sigurd's Ring. It can be very worthwhile on a lot of units, and skill inheritance wise, he's got some great stuff like cancer, for example, and he's just really good. Mobility is king, as always. All right, let's go ahead and take a look at Leaf up next. Now, I have Leaf in the C tier. He's pretty strong when you get him, actually, because his quadruple hit attack is very good. You do an attack on the enemy with all 4 of the weapon types, so swords, lances, axes, and then bows. So you're guaranteed to get a break attack on any non-mage or non-dagger type unit. So that's pretty cool. However, the damage on that attack falls off a cliff towards the latter part of the game. So I'm not really too enthralled by Leaf's Ring. He does have very good skill inheritance early on. So he has Arms Shield, which can grant +5 or +7 when it's fully maxed out. Defense to your unit against enemies that have a weaker weapon. So if you have a sword against a lance, you take -7 damage, or a lance against a sword, you take -7 damage. That's a very, very strong tool to have in the early game portion of the game. So I do like his skill inheritance. And he also, as an asset to his ring, he gives you a lot of build when you equip it. So I found it pretty good on units that have low build but want to use high build or high weight weapons. For example, Timera would be a good one because her build is really trash. But a lot of the lances you're going to want to equip on Timera are very heavy. So being able to fix low build units is pretty good, and that's pretty much the main asset I've found with him. His weapons aren't that great. Lightbrand isn't too spectacular. Master Lance may seem crazy because it has a brave attack and it's got distant counter, but it's not really all that in a bag of chips. And he also has the Killer Axe. Killer weapons are actually very strong in the game, but not this guy's Killer Axe, because you can't do all the crazy shenanigans on it, like give it engravements and refines and stuff. So, not really one of the stronger rings, but he is pretty solid early game. Okay, next up we have Roy, and I actually think Roy is probably the worst ring in the game. Now, I gave Roy's ring to my Sadal. And the reason why is because Roy is actually a pretty sturdy ring. It gives you a lot of HP, and it also gives you a skill called Holdout. So Holdout is basically Miracle. If your HP is above a certain point, any fatal attack is going to leave you with 1 HP. So pretty good on a dancer like Sadal, who doesn't want to take a lot of hits. And if he does get hits, he would like to manage to survive that. So pretty good for raising bulk. That's just about the only good thing I can say about his ring. He does have solid skill inheritance. He has sword power, which can give you +10 attack while using swords at the cost of -10 evasion. That's pretty good. Honestly, that's a lot of power, and it's a worthwhile trade-off, losing only 10 evade. However, it's a very late game skill. It costs a lot of SP to get, and it's not going to be one of your top priorities. So I still have him in D tier regardless of that. Blazing Lion is his special attack, and I think it's probably the weakest special attack in the game. So it causes a big wall of fire to the target enemy and in a 3x3 grid in front of Roy. And it can be okay. There are some situations where it can come in handy, because fire tiles will lower the enemy's mobility, but the reverse is true. It also lowers your own unit's mobility in the process, and if your units happen to be in the way, they will take damage. So it can be more of a bother than a help, I've found. But it's okay as a special, I guess. Still the worst, though, out of this list. Okay, next up we have Lyn. We're going to put Lyn all the way in S. In fact, we're going to put Lyn in front of Marth because Lyn is undoubtedly the best ring in the entire game. She is such a hard carry. Whatever unit you give Lyn's ring to is basically your best unit. And it doesn't matter who you give it to. You could give it to Ivy, you could give it to Alir, you give it to Kagetsu, you give it to Hortensia. I don't care. Give it to whoever you want. They will become instantly your greatest unit in your entire barracks, and there's so many reasons why that is the case. Skill inheritance-wise, Lyn is the best. She has a skill called Speed Taker, which grants a stacking speed up 2 every time you KO an enemy, and it caps at plus 10. So plus 10 speed from one skill is amazing. Speed is like the strongest stat in this game, I would say, because as I said earlier, evade tanking is your main way to defend. And anytime you raise speed, you're also raising evade. And the enemies on Maddening are pretty quick, at least the bosses and some of the like sword master type enemies, they do have a lot of speed. So you're not going to be able to double attack them or avoid getting doubled by them without having a lot of speed yourself. Also, Lyn has Alacrity, which is basically just desperation from Fire Emblem Heroes. It doesn't work in the same way, though. It doesn't have a HP requirement. You just have to have more speed than the foe. It's only plus 5 speed, which is enough to do a double attack in the first place when it's fully leveled up. So a very strong tandem there, Alacrity and also Alacrity and Speed Taker. Very powerful combo. Her weapons are really strong. She's got Manicotti, which is effective against armor and cavalry types. She has Mulagir, which is effective against dragon, and a very good trio trifecta of effective types there, because most of the enemies or bosses are going to be dragons, and then a lot of the mook enemies, like the mobs, are going to be armors and also cavalry. So very good weapon set. She has Astra Storm, which I think, if it's not the strongest special attack, it's definitely the most useful because it has 10 range on it and you can attack any enemy within that space. So you can use it to snipe bosses, you can use it to snipe thieves that have just opened a chest. There's just so many uses for Lyn's ring. It's good in every facet. Every single thing about it is amazing. So yeah, that is why I have her as the best ring in the game. Okay, next up we have Erica. We're going to go ahead and toss Erica in the A tier with Sigurd. So Erica is another really good combat ring. She doesn't offer too much support. Her skill inheritance isn't the greatest either. She does have this one skill called Gentility, which is going to decrease damage you take by 5 points. I believe it goes up to 7 when it's fully leveled up. But it's a nice little defensive tool. However, the main thing you're getting out of Erica's ring is Lunar Brace. That is her main selling point. When you initiate combat, you're going to deal 30% of the foe's defense as damage back to them, which is very strong in Maddening mode where enemies are coming at you with like 40 plus defense. So very, very good tool for causing damage. And her special attack is another good one. Twin Strike, I think it's called, where she'll do a combo attack with Ephraim on the enemy, and the enemies can't counterattack, and it does a lot of damage. Very good boss killer, very good against the dragon enemies that come at you. And she does also have effective against Corrupted. So Corrupted are another very common enemy type. Being effective against them is a very useful tool to have. So very combat potent ring right there, and that's why she's in the A tier. Okay, next up we have Ike. I'm going to go ahead and put Ike in the B tier. Ike is one of the ones I could probably be talked into moving up a little bit, I feel. There's definitely a lot of good things about him. At first, I thought he sucked, but he does have Reposition, which is an amazing assist for mobility uses or just positioning shenanigans. He gives you a ton of defense, so his ring itself gives you a lot of defense. And then also, he has a bunch of moves that will raise your defense. So Resolve Plus gives you plus 7 to defense and res after you fall below 75% health. He also has Great Ether, which is going to give you plus 5 defense and res while you're charging it. And he has Ragnall, which is a pretty strong weapon. 2-range sword, and it also gives you another plus 5 defense. So you could really start to hold out against your enemies on Maddening that are doing so much damage just by having Ike's ring equipped and having all of that defense. He also has some good weapons, like Irvon has a ton of might and a ton of accuracy, so you can do a lot of damage with that. He also has the hammer, which is effective against armor, and it smashes. I would have preferred if it wasn't a smash weapon, but, I mean, it would be kind of weird for a hammer not to do a smash attack. And he's also from Smash Bros, right? So, yeah, I guess they had to give him a smash weapon there. Skill inheritance, he's got some good stuff. Resolve, like I said, is pretty good. He has Wrath as well, which is going to raise your crit by 1 for each point of HP you've lost, up to 30. 30 crit is amazing. Crit in this game is also one of your primary sources of damage. I feel like the killer weapons, like we said with Leaf, are probably the strongest weapons you can use after you've given them engravements and refined them fully. The killer weapons definitely feel like my main source of damage. So any skill that raises crit like Wrath does is definitely going to be strong. Also Resolve, also Reposition, so a lot of good things about him. He also has Axe Power as well, which is plus 10 damage when using axes at the cost of 10 avoidance. So a very strong set of skills that he's got. However, there are some wonky things about him, like 2 turns to charge up Great Ether in terms of the first use charging and then the second use attacking is a little bit clunky. And he also breaks walls down in one hit. I don't really see the purpose of that. I don't know why they gave him that, but he's good. He's just a little bit wonky. That's my main takeaway with Ike. All right, next up we have Micaiah. We're going to go ahead and put Micaiah also in the B tier. I think I'm going to put her ahead of Ike because there are a lot of good things about Micaiah. Maybe I should put her ahead of Celica too. Micaiah's ring has a lot of usability to it because grinding experience and SP in this game is very tough on Maddening, and she has a really easy way to do that early on. So Great Sacrifice is going to fully recover all allies on the map regardless of where they are at the cost of all your HP but 1. And then also it just gives you a massive ton of experience and SP. So you can use it for grinding purposes early on in the game. She's got a really good weapon set, like she has Thani, which is effective against armor and cav, and it's got a lot of power, so a very good weapon there. She also has Nosferatu, which can heal, and she has Shine, which can illuminate dark spaces. So pretty solid weapons. She is really good on staff units. She enables staves for any unit that's given her ring. So any unit can use staffs, which are very good in the game. And also, she can extend the range of staffs. So you could heal from multiple spaces away. If you gave her a healing staff, it would essentially be a Physic staff. So a lot of really good things to say about Micaiah, but I don't think she quite makes it into the A tier. I could be talked into moving her up, though, so I wouldn't say she's just going to stay here forever. As far as skill inheritance goes, I think Micaiah is pretty weak, though. She doesn't really have anything too worthwhile. She does have some interesting staff skills, but they're not really all that in a bag of chips, so I would just have her in the B tier. But very, very solid ring. Okay, next up we have Lucina. I'm going to go ahead and put Lucina in the A tier. I feel like Lucina is... You might even be able to talk me to moving her down, actually, because she's really in the A tier only because of Bonded Shield. If you're playing on Maddening, Bonded Shield is one of your easiest, like, cheese-it strategies. It's going to give all allies surrounding Lucina a 80% chance to dodge the first hit. So on fast units, which you're going to have a lot of fast units with Speed Taker Lyn, they're going to be able to just take no damage at all on the enemy phase. 80% though, it can backfire. I've had a lot of situations where my unit will still get hit even with Bonded Shield, and when that happens, it really sucks. But it's still really strong. You can create a big choke point, or you can create a blockade in front of the enemies and force them to attack units that they have no chance of damaging. So very good there. Also, Dual Assist Plus is really clutch. I gave Lucina's ring to Fogato, so he can attack. He has a lot of reach because he's a cavalry bow type. And when he has Dual Assist Plus, he can attack from pretty far away. He can do a chain attack. And it's only got a 70% chance to activate, but that's still pretty good. So being able to do that is a cheeky way to add some damage to your other allies. So those things are really good. I feel like her weapons aren't that great, though. She has Parthia, which is not effective against anything, except flying, because it's a bow, basically. And then she has the Falchion, which is effective against Dragon, but weapon-wise, she's not really that big of a standout. In terms of her special attack, All for One, I feel like it might be one of the weaker ones, like Roy's Blazing Lion, because it requires a lot of setup. You need a lot of units within space, and it's just a little awkward to use it. Doesn't really do that much damage unless it's been set up, and you're not really going to be... It might be good for a final blow on a boss, but it's not too good against the waves and waves of enemies you're going to find on Maddening. So she's here solely because of Bonded Shield and a little bit Dual Assist Plus. That is a very good skill for skill inheritance, though. Dual Assist Plus, you put that on a bunch of units, and you can really start piling on a lot of damage. Okay, next up we have Corrin's Ring. I'm going to go ahead and put Corrin in the C tier, in front of Leaf, in fact. So Corrin's Ring is one of the few rings that gives you bonus magic. So you get +4 magic by having it equipped. And there's a lot of magic units in this game. I feel like that's the real reason I've been using her ring the most. I gave her ring to Vale. So Vale is a magic user, and getting the +4 magic is very helpful. Also, Vale is a dragon, so you get access to Corrin's Dragon Vein with Dragon ability, which is pretty cool. So, Dragon Vein, I feel like I'm kind of torn up on Dragon Vein. Maybe I might be able to move her up depending on who is given her ring, because the Dragon Vein is going to have different effects depending on the type of unit that has it equipped. But it's very situational. It's not always going to be an amazing asset to have, but it does come in handy for sure. Her special attack, Torrential Roar, is going to hit a 3-line radius in front of her and also prevent all of those target enemies from being able to move on the next turn. So a nice little attack there for keeping other units safe after you've attacked and the enemies aren't going to be able to reach them anymore. So that is good. But like I said, the primary selling point for me with her was the bonus magic. So I gave it to Vale for that reason. For skill inheritance, she does have this one skill called... What is it? I think it's called Pair Up, where you can prevent the enemies from doing chain attacks. That's a really strong skill to give to a tank, because in this game, the enemies are going to be doing a majority of damage on you from chain attacks. And unfortunately, you can't avoid chain attacks, because they always have an 80% chance to hit you. So even putting in a void tank in front of a whole mob of enemies has some danger factor involved, unless you have the pair-up skill. So that is a really nice one. She has Draconic Hex, which decreases all the enemies' stats by 4 after attacking them. But I found that to only be really solid against bosses where regular enemies in the game, you should be trying to finish them off in 1 or 2 hits anyway. So a solid ring. Has some shenanigans with Dragon Vein, but I would keep her in C tier just for situational purposes. And last but not least, we have Byleth, who we're going to put in the S tier. Byleth's ring. Actually, do I want Byleth above Marth? I feel like Byleth and Marth are probably the 2 contenders to be second best next to Lyn. I don't know what the order is I would have them in. I think I'm going to have Marth ahead of Byleth for now, but Byleth has got some really good tools. So he has Goddess Dance, which is the Heron Dance from Tellius games. Basically, you dance all adjacent allies after using it, and that is going to lead to a daisy chain of attacks that you can do on the enemies and also the bosses. If you have Sadal within range of that, then the antics only continue. So a very, very powerful boss killing tool, or just regular enemy killing tool. You're going to be using Goddess Dance practically all the time. He also has a wide assortment of weapons. Basically, all of the 3 houses' regalia are at his disposal. So we've got access to things like Lewin, which raises damage based on your speed stat. It's a very powerful weapon. He has also Sword of the Creator, which is a 2-range sword, and it does some good damage. It's also effective against dragons, so that's nice. And he's also got the ability to use rally skills. You can rally your allies to raise some stat points. There's nothing bad to say about Byleth at all. And for skill inheritance, he's got mentorship, which is an amazing skill. Grants the equipped ally and also allies adjacent to them a 1.2 times experience modifier. So very good for grinding. I gave virtually all my characters mentorship and then speed taker for late game. So just incredible. There's nothing bad to say about him. He's good in all aspects, just like all the other S tier rings. So that's going to cover us for the tier list here for the Emblem Rings. R.I.P. Roy is all the way down there in D tier. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section down below. Do you agree? Do you disagree? Let me know if you would move anyone up, move anyone down, and I'll take all of that into consideration. Also, I don't have the DLC, so no Tiki, no Edelgard at the moment. I don't have access to them, so I can't put them on this list. But if you guys have the DLC, I've heard the DLC rings are pretty busted, so they would probably end up in S tier, but I don't know. So if you guys have the DLC, let me know how those rings held up for you on Maddening. But that's going to wrap us up for this video, so hope y'all enjoyed. And this is your boy Tacho signing out. There are a couple more Engage videos I plan on doing later, so stick around if you're interested. And I will catch y'all again on the flip side.